Ever wonder why we name our military bases, our roads, even our schools after guys like this? But absolutely, positively, never after this guy. This is Benedict Arnold, a name synonymous with treason. If you looked up traitor in the dictionary, you'd probably just see his picture staring back at you. He tried to betray America during the Revolutionary War. It's obvious, right? And these guys, these are the leaders of a violent rebellion against the United States, a rebellion that lasted 4 brutal years and killed over 600,000 Americans. That's more Americans than died in all other U.S. wars combined up until Vietnam. They're traitors too, right? Maybe not. Or rather, it depends entirely on who you ask, and even where you ask it. We've long decided that Benedict Arnold's rightful place is in the history books, not atop statues. 160 years later, Americans are still divided over how to remember the Civil War and the people who participated in the rebellion. So why are Benedict Arnold and the Confederates treated so wildly differently? Let's call it the traitor paradox. For Benedict Arnold, there's never been any question, no debate, no softening over time. His name is synonymous with betrayal for a reason. Arnold was a brilliant, often reckless, Revolutionary War general. He fought bravely, won critical victories, and felt utterly disrespected by the Continental Congress. He felt cheated out of money and promotions, so he plotted the ultimate betrayal to surrender the crucial American stronghold of West Point, the very heart of the Continental Army's defenses, to the British. It was an act born of ego, greed, and resentment. His plot was uncovered on September 23rd, 1780. 2 days later, Arnold fled, disappearing behind British lines. Arnold may have escaped being tried and executed for treason, but he could not escape the judgment of history. It's not as if he didn't try. He took to the social media of the time, the open letter, desperately attempting to spin his actions as patriotic. He bizarrely insulted the Continental Congress, claiming they were corruptly prolonging the war after its aims were met. He even tried to use anti-Catholic sentiment, attacking the new alliance with France. He argued the British couldn't be beaten, urging Americans to swear loyalty to King George before it was too late. No one bought it. Not then, not ever. Not even the British, who were more than a little peeved Arnold demanded the full money and promotion he was promised, despite never actually delivering West Point, and certainly not the Americans. General George Washington himself condemned Arnold's act as treason of the blackest dye, effectively sealing Arnold's fate in the American memory. There would be no monuments, no commemorative postage stamps, no holidays, just eternal infamy. The Confederacy was fundamentally different from Benedict Arnold. This wasn't one disgruntled officer going rogue. This was nearly half the country, 11 states, millions of people, a massive army, an entire nation forming to actively fight the United States. They didn't see themselves as traitors. They saw it as a second American Revolution, a fight for self-determination, just as the American founders had fought for independence. Yet they were fully aware of the stakes. They knew that if they lost, they risked arrest and punishment for treason. And as it happened, Confederate President Jefferson Davis was imprisoned and indicted for treason. Robert E. Lee also faced a treason indictment. They had levied war against the United States. By definition, that is treason. But something profound happened. The country's view of the rebels, unlike Benedict Arnold, softened dramatically with time. Ultimately, there were no treason trials for Davis, Lee, or anyone else. For one thing, President Andrew Johnson's administration saw a real risk treason trials could end up with courts ruling secession legal. A policy of amnesty prevailed, driven by an overwhelming desire for national healing. Johnson, who initially called for traitors to be severely punished, issued broad pardons instead. The nation was exhausted, divided, and frankly, just wanted to move on. A significant reason for this radical shift came from the Union veterans themselves. Though they had fought hard, endured unimaginable suffering, many didn't feel hatred or anger towards their former Confederate foes. During the war, shared hardships sometimes led to grudging respect, even fraternization between the lines. After the war, these informal bonds blossomed into grand blue-gray reunions at hallowed battlefields like Gettysburg. Union and Confederate veterans, some missing limbs, met, shook hands, and shared stories. They were bonded by the horrors of war. This alone doesn't explain why the people who took up arms against the United States are having their service honored by it. Unlike Arnold, the Confederates were able to rewrite history. The rewrite is called the lost cause myth, a deliberately dishonest reframing of the Civil War. The lost cause argued the war wasn't about slavery. It was a noble, principled, and ultimately tragic struggle over states' rights. It romanticized a Southern way of life that ignored the brutal treatment of black slaves and ignored that those slaves would have remained in bondage had the South won. This narrative was aggressively pushed, primarily by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They erected thousands of monuments across the South, decades after the war ended, during the early 20th century, cementing their version of history. They wrote textbooks, influenced public memory, and essentially rewrote history for generations. For the North, embracing this alternate history was seen as the political price for the nation to move past the war's bitter divisions. But for Black Southerners, the cost was devastating. Accepting the lost cause allowed the South to largely restore its old racial hierarchy, replacing physical bondage with economic slavery under brutal Jim Crow laws. It justified segregation, disenfranchisement, and terror. There's a certain irony in the different ways Arnold and the Confederates have been treated. Benedict Arnold was lousy at treason. He failed to turn over West Point to the British. Once he switched sides, he likely killed fewer than 100 patriots. Arnold's treachery, however unsuccessful, was enough to erase him from any official recognition. A fort named for Arnold at West Point was renamed after his treason was discovered. There's a statue at the site of his victory at Saratoga, but is only a nameless statue of his wounded leg. A plaque for Arnold at West Point is one of several honoring the Revolution's generals, but it bears only his rank and date of birth, not his name. On the other hand, Lee and his fellow Confederates were pretty good at treason. They were responsible for thousands of American deaths and betrayed the principles West Point trains its officers to defend. The rebel service and their cause were glorified by the nation the rebellion sought to destroy. The bases got their Confederate names in the early to mid-20th century at the height of the Lost Causes influence in the Jim Crow era. Only very recently, in the last few years, has the U.S. started taking steps to address this glaring contradiction. In 2022, the Department of Defense finally ordered the removal of tributes to Confederates, Lee, Beauregard, Hardee, and so many others from its properties. That correction was short-lived. Early in 2025, the Defense Department reversed course and ordered the portrait of Robert E. Lee returned to West Point. It also announced a memorial to Confederate dead will be returned to Arlington National Cemetery. And it ordered the names of 9 military bases restored, but with a twist. Fort Liberty was once again Fort Bragg. But instead of being named to honor Confederate General Braxton Bragg, it's now named in honor of a World War II hero, PFC Roland L. Bragg. The battle isn't over yet. At the time of this video, a bipartisan group in Congress is pushing legislation that will reverse the Defense Department efforts to return Confederates to places of prominence. For now, the people being honored have changed. But for some, the echo of the original Confederate names can be heard loud and clear. We want to hear from you. What do you think should happen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this dive into history valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the past, and make sure you tap the notification bell. Take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.